Tonight, the life and trials of O.J. Simpson, one of America's most polarizing figures. The rise and fall of a football hero.
O.J. Simpson probably thought that he was invincible.
And the defendant in a murder case called the trial of the century.
Not guilty.
It's like a spy novel. Based on what?
Two top security officers launch a lawsuit claiming they were unfairly linked to foreign interference.
You chose greed.
Also, the head of Bell Canada testifies over massive job cuts.
Bell continues to invest in news and media.
Plus, new images of the stranded whale in BC with preparations underway for a precarious rescue. And putting love on the map.
We aren't Vegas, obviously, but I mean, we do have a chapel of love now.
Getting to the heart of one village's plan to host a whole lot of weddings.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina. Reporting tonight, Heather Butts.
Good evening. The world is reacting tonight to the death of O.J. Simpson, the football star and actor whose televised trial for the murder of his ex-wife and her friend captivated millions in the 1990s. Simpson's family announced his death today, saying he succumbed to his battle with cancer. The controversial figure at the center of what many call the trial of the century, dead at 76. Here's CTV's Joy Malvin.
From football star to Hollywood fame, O.J. Simpson was an all-American hero.
And this is Tree Sweet, the orange juice I grew up on.
Beloved until the brutal murders of his ex-wife Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ron Goldman outside Simpson's L.A. home. The marriage rocky, allegations of domestic abuse.
I don't want to stay on the line. He's going to beat the shit. Wait a minute.
O.J. insisted he was innocent, but went on the run.
911, what are you reporting? This is AC. I have O.J. in the car.
TV networks carried Simpson's stunning slow-motion car chase live. Eventually surrendering, he was charged with the savage stabbings.
Ron and Nicole were butchered.
In what was called the trial of the century, more than 100 million people watched, gripped by every detail and those infamous gloves.
If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
Trial lawyers became celebrities. The sensational case captivated and divided America. And when the verdict came,
the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty of the crime of murder.
Celebrations erupted. Others left in shock.
You know, it was a very divisive case. People hated him, hated me for representing him. It was divided along racial lines.
Simpson was cleared but never recaptured his fame. Found guilty in a wrongful death civil suit by the victims' families, ordered to pay $33 million, Simpson paid little of it. Struggling to remake his life, he wrote a hypothetical book, If I Did It, losing the rights to the Goldman family, who published it as a confession. Of Simpson's death, Fred Goldman said, "It's no great loss to the world. It's a further reminder of Ron being gone." And Kate O'Callaghan, who rose to fame as a witness, added,
"To the family of the beautiful Nicole Brown Simpson, may we always cherish her memories."
Ultimately, Simpson did do serious jail time in Nevada for armed robbery involving sports memorabilia he said was his. Paroled after 9 years.
As I said, I've done my time. I'd just like to get back to my family and friends.
In a video before his death, he told fans,
"I'll be back on that golf course."
A legend whose rise and fall from grace is an American tragedy. Joy Malvin, CTV News, Washington.
Two men who spent their careers putting themselves in harm's way to protect Canadians are launching a lawsuit against the federal government. The security officials say they have been wrongfully linked to a foreign interference case at a tremendous cost. CTV's Judy Trin has the exclusive details.
These two men have more than 6 decades of policing experience. Peter Merrifield is with the RCMP, while Paul McNamara worked with Vancouver police doing undercover work.
I've done everything, homicides, drugs, gangs, stock market frauds.
In 2021, both men were flagged by CSIS and lost their security clearance.
Warrants on my emails, warrants on my phones, financial productions to my banks, potential wiretaps.
At the time, McNamara was head of security for the U.S. Embassy and its consulates. He lost his job.
This is investigation by gossip and rumor. Nobody came and spoke to me. CSIS never came and spoke to me, and unfortunately, even the U.S. Department of State didn't interview me when they terminated me.
In this lawsuit filed against the federal government, both McNamara and Merrifield claim that CSIS wrongly linked them to Bill Miker, who's accused of working for China. The two men allege that the government feared Miker was trying to recruit them, suspicions that arose during the arrest of Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou and the detention of the two Michaels, while Merrifield was head of security for the Prime Minister.
I'm standing next to the Prime Minister every day. I'm driving him around. I'm listening to his phone calls and his briefings. I would be deeply concerned if I thought that some foreign interference had penetrated that person.
In a previous interview with CTV News, Miker denied being a spy and said that before his arrest in Canada last year, he checked in with CSIS overseas.
I'm a patriot, not a traitor.
McNamara believes CSIS revoked his security clearance, believing he met with Miker in China, a meeting he says never happened.
But to say I'm a national security threat, it makes me angry. I'll challenge you here, and I will go to my grave proving that I am not a national security threat and that I lost my job through inept investigations, through people who have already drawn their conclusions and wrote the report.
Paul McNamara has been unable to get a job for the past 2 years. Peter Merrifield was able to regain his security clearance after intense vetting. Both men are suing the federal government for $5.5 million. As for CSIS, it's not commenting on a matter before the courts. Heather.
Judy Trin for us in Ottawa. Thank you. Canada's top court won't hear arguments from victims' families urging them to release prison and parole documents concerning serial killer Paul Bernardo. The families of Kristen French and Leslie Mahaffey have spent years fighting to expose the confidential information used to decide Bernardo's prospects for parole. The federal court says the release will be a total invasion of Bernardo's privacy. Bernardo is serving a life sentence for kidnapping, sexual assault, and the murder of the two teenagers. There were tough questions on Parliament Hill today about job cuts at Bell Canada. The company let go thousands of workers earlier this year, along with ending multiple newscasts. Bell is the parent company of CTV. Its CEO defended those decisions today at a House of Commons committee. CTV's Adrian Gabriel on the testimony.
So having Canadian companies,
Mr. Bibick, there's just one question.
Having
a tense hearing with Canada's largest telecom company on the hot seat.
You have gutted local newsrooms in this country. Don't tell me you've added.
In February, Bell Canada, the parent company of CTV News, announced it was cutting 4,800 positions from its workforce, canceling multiple CTV newscasts and selling 45 of its 103 radio stations. Today, Bell's CEO, Mirko Bibick, testified on Parliament Hill, where he faced pointed questions.
Is it justified that you just laid off 6,100 employees in the last 8 months when you have received hundreds of millions of dollars from the federal government, and it is a company worth $40 billion?
I would think that we'd want strong Canadian companies that can continue to employ tens of thousands of Canadians.
You could have chosen to prioritize workers with that money, but you chose greed. How do you justify that?
We are continuing to lower wireless prices each and every day. If we don't have Canadian companies that grow and that invest in critical infrastructure like ours and that create jobs, we're going to have a massive problem in the country, and that goes for media as well.
Ahead of today's hearing in Ottawa, Bell issued this press release titled Facts Matter, saying in part that Canada's traditional media sector is in crisis due to changing consumer habits, technological disruptions, shifting advertiser demand, and vigorous competition from foreign streamers and global web giants.
Without a Canadian broadcasting system, there will be no news, except maybe the CBC.
News was always a money loser. These were a condition of license when they received the license to begin with.
Communications professor Gregory Taylor believes Bell Media has both a moral and regulatory responsibility.
We're losing a lot of really good journalists who provide an essential function. This cuts to the core of what we need in a democratic society.
The recent BCE job cuts amount to the largest number of layoffs at the company in decades. Bell says without significant regulatory overhaul, the broadcast industry is in peril. Heather.
Adrian, thank you. Just a day after the Prime Minister defended his decisions at the inquiry into foreign interference, he said it's his job to question contradictions in intelligence.
No leader should simply be a passive receiver of information and intelligence. We have a role to play in asking questions.
But the leader of the opposition took aim at Justin Trudeau's testimony.
The Prime Minister was asked why he didn't do anything about this interference, even though he was warned in briefing notes, is that he doesn't read briefing notes.
An initial report following the inquiry is expected next month. One of the country's leading charities says it's reached a tipping point and is desperate for help. The Ottawa Mission can no longer keep up with the influx of asylum seekers, many sent directly to the organization upon arriving in the country because there is not enough housing. CTV's Annie Bergeron-Oliver reports.
Right down here.
Lunch at the Ottawa Mission is always crowded.
Would you like some soup?
The shelter operates at more than 100% capacity, and demand is showing no signs of slowing.
We have a number of people coming in needing accommodation. There's just no housing for them. There's no meals for them. So we're at overcapacity in terms of our beds. We're at overcapacity in terms of the number of meals we're having to provide for people.
The mission isn't alone. Across the country, shelters are struggling to keep up. They say more asylum seekers are needing help at the same time as more people are finding themselves out of a home because of rising rents and rent evictions.
We expect between 260 and 300,000 Canadians will experience homelessness this year. This level of homelessness, I don't think we've ever seen.
Fixing that problem requires more affordable housing. But right now, demand is outstripping supply. And the Parliamentary Budget Officer says Canada needs to build an extra 1.3 million homes to close that gap by 2030.
We all have to live somewhere. So if it's difficult to find appropriate housing, then it drives up the cost of housing.
To help, Ottawa today announced it is allowing first-time homebuyers with insured mortgages to amortize over 30 years when purchasing newly built homes. They'll also be able to withdraw $60,000 from their RRSP, and those withdrawals will have an extra 3-year grace period before interest charges apply.
The measures we announced today are really going to help young Canadians.
But for those struggling to stay off the streets, Tilly fears Ottawa's recent promises won't help.
The language we're hearing now is, wow, we're in a housing crisis. Welcome to it. We're seeing it.
Housing advocates want the federal government to introduce a housing benefit that would help keep more people in their homes. They also want to see additional assistance so newcomers can stay out of the shelter system. Heather?
All right, Annie, thanks. A popular social media app is rolling out tools it says will protect kids and fight sexual extortion. The move by Instagram comes as companies face growing criticism for not doing enough to enhance the safety of users. CTV's Sarah Plowman has more.
Seconds is all it takes to send a nude photo but then face blackmail. A nightmare that's trapped teenagers like William Dwarant, preyed on by criminals on social media. The 16-year-old took his own life. Grieving parents have pushed for tech giants to prop up defenses. Today, Instagram says it is testing a new tool that will blur photos detecting nudity in direct messages and urge users to think twice before sending them. The feature will be on by default for anyone under 18. Adults will be alerted to opt in. Dwarant's mother believes it's a good step.
It's going to make the job worse for people trying to get new picture from kids, so that's a good thing.
This cybersecurity expert says it's about time.
It's good, but it's a tourniquet on a massive wound.
It's the start of what needs to happen.
RCMP calls sextortion affecting young people a public safety crisis. In the past 18 months, the Canadian Centre for Child Protection received 6,000 reports.
I think we have to be cautious in terms of how we're applauding these efforts that should have been instituted a decade ago. So let's give them a slow clap. But really?
Instagram says it's also developing a way to identify accounts that may actually be sextortion scammers and stop those users from contacting teenagers even if they follow one another. Heather.
Thanks, Sarah. Coming up, the former interpreter accused of stealing from a baseball star.
Mr. Mitsuhara used and abused that position of trust.
Millions stolen from Shohei Ohtani to pay off gambling debts. Plus, castaways once stranded on a deserted island, now saved. U.S. officials have outlined federal charges against the former interpreter of Shohei Ohtani, accusing him of betraying his trust and robbing Ohtani of millions of dollars to pay off gambling debts. CTV's Heather Wright reports.
$16 million in less than 3 years. That's how much money U.S. officials say was stolen from Shohei Ohtani by his interpreter, a person he trusted.
Mr. Mitsuhara had unique access to Mr. Ohtani's finances. Mr. Mitsuhara used and abused that position of trust in order to take advantage of Mr. Ohtani.
Ippei Mitsuhara has been charged with federal bank fraud, accused of transferring money from an account he helped set up for the LA Dodgers star to pay for bets with an illegal gambling ring.
And over time, Mr. Mitsuhara's bets became larger and larger in amounts.
The U.S. attorney says Mitsuhara went to elaborate lengths to access Ohtani's account, even impersonating the Japanese baseball star to bank employees.
And thereby convinced the bank to approve large wire transfers of large amounts of money to the bookmakers.
Last month, Mitsuhara was abruptly fired by the Dodgers. Initially, he told ESPN that Ohtani had paid off his gambling debts, but changed his story the next day, saying Ohtani had no knowledge and never transferred any money. There have been questions over whether Ohtani was involved in sports gambling, but the Justice Department says he is considered a victim, and there's no evidence he was aware of what his interpreter was up to.
The criminal complaint that was filed today definitively shows that that money, the $16 million that's in question, was in fact stolen.
This investigation began as part of a larger probe into illegal gambling. Mitsuhara says he never bet on baseball, something investigators confirm. Still, the MLB is conducting its own review, as it is illegal for players and team employees to bet on the game. Heather Wright, CTV News, Toronto.
To a remarkable rescue now. The U.S. Coast Guard saved 3 fishermen from a remote island in the Pacific. Their boat was damaged by rough waves in Micronesia. They used palm tree branches to spell out signs for help. It was spotted by a Navy jet. They survived for more than a week before being found. And a daring Canadian rescue after the break. Putting the final steps in motion to move a baby whale. The pieces are falling into place for a high-stakes rescue of a baby orca, but it carries a lot of risk. CTV's Andrew Johnson is in the remote coastal community tonight.
It's one of the final dress rehearsals for a daring rescue. A large sling being hoisted out of the water and onto a waiting truck. When it's happening for real, there will be a 2-year-old killer whale calf inside, and there may be only one chance to get it right. Just a few hundred meters away, unaware of all of the fuss being made over her, we spotted the little orca this morning. The whale was coming up for air about every 10 minutes or so. The spot she's surfacing today is not far from where the whale's mother became beached at low tide and died. That was close to 3 weeks ago. Experts fear the calf will struggle to find enough food and can't survive in the lagoon. That's why some of the world's leading marine mammal experts, veterinarians, and environmental consultants have traveled to the tiny town of Zavalis on Vancouver Island's rugged west coast. Their plan is to reunite the orca the local Ahadasat First Nation has named Brave Little Hunter with her family pod. The whale will be corralled with a net, taken in the sling by truck to a waiting boat, then transferred to a net pen out in the open ocean. The hope is the orca's remaining family members, which include a grandmother and an aunt, will be nearby. The original timeline to pull this off ended today. We're told the tricky rescue has a lot of moving parts and it's likely a one-shot deal. So the pressure is on to get this right and keep the people involved on the water as well as the whale safe. Andrew Johnson, CTV News, Zabalis, BC.
And an update on a determined 5-year-old girl from Regina who took on City Hall.
Nobody wants to be left out.
Blake Turnbull convinced council to put $175,000 towards an elevator to make a water slide at an outdoor pool fully accessible. More fundraising will be needed. But Blake's mom celebrated the win, saying the pair survived 9 hours at the meeting on chips and leftover chicken balls. Nice work, Blake. Still to come, a small town with a big heart, tying the knot in a chapel of love. A small Saskatchewan community is taking its name to heart. Hopeful couples will travel to tie the knot in the village of love. Here's CTV's Allison Bamford.
For years, happy couples have traveled from near and far to tie the knot in love.
A couple came down, their last name was Love, and got married in love.
Sometimes at the Jamboree grounds, others get hitched outside the post office. And when couples aren't passing through, their postcards and wedding invitations are, just to be stamped with the seal of love.
We will have wedding invitations come in throughout the year. On the heart, it says Love at First Sight, which is actually the title for the history book here in Love.
In a town where all signs point to love, there was one big thing missing.
We aren't Vegas, obviously, but I mean, we do have a chapel of love now here.
A 2-year community endeavor has transformed a donated train station bunkhouse into this.
We wanted to have a venue where they could come no matter what the weather condition was, and a place that would be nice for them to get married in. So we decided to build the chapel.
The chapel opened late last summer and was only able to host one wedding, but the village is hopeful the wedding bells will ring louder this year in its first full season.
We have a couple from Quebec that just booked in for May 25th.
And when they come to visit, the community is likely to live up to its name.
I think if you come, you'll likely come out of curiosity for the name, but if you stay, that's not why you're staying. You're staying for everything else that is here. And it's a fairly welcoming town.
A small town with big hearts everywhere you turn. Allison Bamford, CTV News, Love.
A place called love. That's our newscast for this Thursday. I'm Heather Butts. Thank you for watching. Good night, and I'll see you again tomorrow.